I used to naively think that I had to talk about myself a lot on dates in order to convey value and to make her more attracted to me. But I realized over the years that it was actually the opposite. And what I want to talk to you about today is that shift and what I noticed as a result. So again, like guys think like they need to talk about how great they are, whether that's their job, whether it's their social life, whether that's their accomplishments, or even worse, like how much money they make. They're leading with these things. However, though, I realize though that you actually should flip it and you should talk about yourself a lot less and get her to do most of the talking. There's this principle, the Pareto principle called 80-20. And what I found was that I did about 20% of the talking on the dates, and I got her to do about 80% of the talking. And really, if you think about it, most people are inherently narcissistic a little bit, and they only care about themselves. They're only thinking about themselves. So, if you get someone to talk about themselves, they're actually enjoying that. Dale Carnegie has a good book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I'm pretty sure this concept came from there, but it's like if you want to be interesting, be interested. And it's so counterintuitive because you think like, how can I be interesting if I'm not doing the talking? But when you show interest, when you show curiosity, it actually feels good to the other person. Think about it. Like, when's the last time someone showed genuine interest in you? Without an agenda, without trying to talk about themselves, or without waiting for you to finish your sentence before they just kind of chimed in. They were like fully present in what you were saying. It feels great, actually. I think it's actually one of the powerful factors in therapy because, my job was to, and as a clinical psychologist was to, give my undivided attention to what they were saying. Because really, and it's kind of rare. Again, most people are selfish and narcissistic and they just want to talk about themselves or they're waiting for you to finish their thoughts so they can kind of get their point across. And when you're on a date and when you're showing genuine interest in the person and more importantly, curiosity, it's actually very powerful, because they kind of talk about themselves, which they like. They let their guard down. You learn more about them and you get perceived as more interesting. It was funny too on dates. I had a handful of times when the girl was like, well, I'm just doing all the talking about myself. I want to know more about you. And I'd be like, okay, what would you like to know? And they'd be like, I don't know. It's just, and then they would go back on to talking about themselves. It's almost just kind of comical. Also, though, when you talk about yourself, you're demystifying yourself. Well, obviously, you're going to be talking about yourself at some point. But it's almost like from like a 48 laws of power perspective, the more you say, the more you kind of give away and the more you kind of show your hand. And I know this is a little bit dark and this is a little bit Machiavellian, but dating is not on a Hallmark movie. Dating operates on like primal attractor switches, and ambiguity and mystery are some of those switches that turn women on too. Like, ooh, I want to know more about him. He's so mysterious. Versus like, this guy won't shut the heck up. All he did was talk about himself. I think my uncle's wife, he remarried. So she's like, I remember when I first met her, she was so curious about me. And I honestly felt like she was genuinely interested in me. And it was such a rare treat. And I was like, wow, she's a great conversationalist. And it's not, I mean, like, obviously you don't want to be a robot and like, where are you from? What did you do? What did you do today? Right? You have to have, obviously, I'm oversimplifying this and there's a lot of nuance to it. For example, when they would tell me about things, I would use that as opportunities to kind of tease them a little bit and be playful and humor and things like that. It wasn't just like a robotic interview. So I'll clarify that. There's also some subtle ways to ask questions where it doesn't feel like a question, like, what is this? What is that? What is that? Versus like, you said you're from Vermont. I'm curious what that was like for you. So that's essentially saying like, what was that like for you? What you're using like, it's just more kind of varied and it feels less like an interview. I'm curious what that was like for you, or tell me more about that. And also, when you're asking questions on a date, you want to keep them open-ended. You know, this is kind of a therapy trick. You know, you want to ask more open-ended questions versus close-ended. So the difference is, are you feeling happy today? That's a close-ended question, like yes or no. It doesn't really allow for much depth in the response. Whereas, tell me about your day today, or how are you feeling today? Right, it's open-ended. So you said you were from Vermont. Did you like living in Vermont? That's a close-ended question. And she's gonna be like, yes or no. And that doesn't really leave room in the conversation for other kind of pathways. Versus like, oh, you said you were from Vermont. Tell me more about that. Or you said you were from Vermont. I'm curious what that was like for you. Like there's just a lot of conversational depth that can arise from that question. And so, you know, not only are you being curious, but you want to have, you know, you want to give her the opportunity to be able to tell more about herself or himself, whatever date you're on. It's funny though, literally, you know, like I said, on these dates, I encountered a couple. It's interesting. There was a couple girls who were really inquisitive too, and it was almost like a frame battle. Who can, you know, interview who? Not to that level, but it was like I had to often like flip it back. And I remember one girl saying like, "Wow, I've never had a guy ask me." She was like, "Oh, I'm usually the one asking a ton of questions on a date." She's like, "I've never had this before." And she later said she found it refreshing. So you'd be surprised. I mean, I encourage you guys to try this out and think and see what you notice. Because again, also, so again, obviously there's a bit of an agenda in the sense that like you're getting her to do a lot of the talking, but it's also like, it's really important in this just to be fully present and paying attention. There's just this non-verbal element when someone's like really into you, like when someone's like really curious about what you're saying. Versus, curiosity is better than like you're just like super, you don't want to be like super intense either, because then that's like creepy and weird, or just like socially miscalibrated. But you know, just being genuinely curious in someone has to say, and notice the results. And obviously this extends beyond dating. You know, this is just super effective for interpersonal relationships in general, platonic, professional, familial, or dating. Right? The ability to be present and genuinely interested in what someone has to say is a hack. Because if you can do that, you're going to separate yourself from the pack. You know, if you're on a job interview and you if you express genuine curiosity and interest and you pay attention to what the other person has to say, versus like you get on a job interview and it's just like, this is what I've done, this is what I've done, this is what I've done, this is what I've done. Because a job interview is essentially a date. But instead of getting the girl, you're getting the job. But I'm a big fan of this 80-20 principle as far as communication, because less is more. And girls like a little mystery. And it just creates intrigue. They want to know more about you. You know, if you say everything about yourself on the first date, then, you know, she has you like figured out. And while people say they want to know all about you, they actually want to have a little intrigue, because that stimulates attraction. They don't want to have it all figured out, because then that's safe and boring. Right? There needs to be a little hint of excitement, and mystery breeds excitement, because there's uncertainty. So let me know in the comments if you've tried this out, or let me know if you've tried. Let me know what happens when you talk about yourself too much, or let me know what it's like when you've experienced that with someone else. Because I'm guessing you felt like tired. You felt, you know, get me out of here. You felt like this is just a burden. This is like taking energy versus giving energy. And I look at that too, in interactions, you know, platonic, professional, whatever. When you express genuine curiosity and interest in someone, you're actually giving them value. Whereas if someone just talked to you about their whole day for 10 minutes, it's actually taking value, because it's just, I find it draining, boring. It's like, dude, I don't want to spend 10 minutes hearing about all this. I don't care. And that's the underlying truth of social interactions too. People don't care. People don't care about you. They care about what you can do for them. And that's the truth. It's not the Hallmark answer, it's not the Hollywood answer, but people care about what you can do for them. And when you express genuine interest and curiosity to someone, it actually is doing something for them because it's validating them. And it's good for their egos to a certain degree. Like, again, because if they feel interested, it's validating to their ego. Like, wow, I'm an interesting person. Like, well, what I have to say is unique and special. So flip it. If you want to be interesting, be interested.